Hello and welcome to our daily devotional. Today, we're diving into the incredible story of Moses, a man whose faith reshaped history. We often remember him for parting the Red Sea or receiving the Ten Commandments, but his journey of faith started much earlier, in the quiet, profound choices he made long before he became a great leader. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 11 verses 24 and 25. It says, "By faith Moses, when he was grown, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin." This passage is powerful. It tells us that true faith isn't just about big, heroic acts. It's about the decisions of the heart, the choice to stand with God's people, even when it means facing hardship. Imagine Moses' life. He grew up in the opulent palace of Pharaoh with all the luxury, education, and privilege a person could dream of. He was, for all intents and purposes, an Egyptian prince. Yet, something deep inside him was stirring. He felt a powerful connection to his own people, the Hebrews, who were suffering under the heavy hand of slavery. The Bible tells us he saw an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew and intervened. But think about what must have happened before that moment. Before that public act of defiance, Moses likely spent years quietly identifying with his people. Perhaps he would visit his biological mother's home, learning about his heritage. Maybe he chose to work alongside the Hebrew slaves, not as one of them, but as someone who wanted to understand their struggle, to feel the weight of their labor, to share in their exhaustion. He could have used his privileged position to help his family and friends in small, unseen ways. This choice to identify with the suffering of others is a profound act of faith. It's a continuous process, not a single dramatic event. Moses was choosing to connect with his people's pain while still living in the palace. He was building a bridge between two completely different worlds. Of course, this came with incredible risk. A man of his status, an adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, mingling with slaves? That would have looked suspicious. Pharaoh could have seen him as a potential threat. A privileged young man spending time with the oppressed could be seen as someone stirring up trouble, planting seeds of rebellion. Any quiet act of defending his people, any small gesture of solidarity, could have been interpreted as an act of insurrection. The author of Hebrews reminds us that Moses chose to be mistreated with God's people. This wasn't just a future possibility. The risk was present from the moment he decided to align his heart with theirs. He risked being misunderstood, punished, or even exiled by the very family that raised him. This shows us that following God often requires immense courage and wisdom, even before we step into a public role. The tension between his faith, his empathy for his people, and the personal danger he faced was very real. He had to navigate this complex situation with discernment. Then came the turning point. Moses saw an Egyptian brutally beating a Hebrew. His quiet empathy turned into decisive action. He intervened. Suddenly, the hidden danger became a real and immediate threat. For any other member of the royal court, this might have been overlooked. But Moses was a Hebrew by birth. His action was not just a crime. It was a betrayal in the eyes of Pharaoh. It was a direct challenge to the system of power. Realizing the extreme danger he was in, Moses fled to Midian. This wasn't an act of cowardice or a failure of faith. It was an act of prudence, of wisdom. God's timing is perfect, and it wasn't yet time for Moses to lead Israel. His flight was a necessary step in God's plan, giving him time to grow and prepare in the wilderness for the monumental task that lay ahead. This part of his story teaches us that true faith includes discernment. We are called to act for justice, but we must also be wise, not exposing ourselves to danger that God has not yet equipped us or called us to face. The writer of Hebrews really hones in on this idea of renunciation. Moses gave up something tangible. He renounced the comfort, the power, and the fleeting pleasures of the palace. Why? Because he chose something greater, to stand with God's suffering people. This is a powerful lesson for all of us. The luxuries and comforts of this world are temporary. They fade away, but faithfulness to God and the justice he stands for is eternal. When we choose to identify with those who are suffering, we are expressing a faith that requires us to let go of our own momentary satisfaction. Every small act of empathy, every choice to step out of our comfort zone and stand with the oppressed is training. It's preparing us for the greater calling God has for our lives. So, what are the practical lessons we can take from Moses' early life? First, we are called to identify with suffering. Hebrews 13:3 says, "Remember those who are in prison as though you were in prison with them, and those who are mistreated as if you yourselves were suffering." Like Moses, we are invited to share in the pain of others, to let our hearts be moved with compassion, even when we are not personally affected. This might mean listening to someone's story, volunteering our time, or using our resources to help those in need. Second, we must be willing to renounce temporary pleasures. Our world constantly tells us to seek comfort, ease, and personal gain. But a life of faith calls us to a higher purpose. We shouldn't cling so tightly to our own comfort that we become unwilling to stand for what is right. Prioritizing God's will and justice sometimes means making sacrifices. Third, we must act with both courage and prudence. Moses didn't wait until he was a famous leader to live out his faith. He started with small, quiet acts of solidarity. He showed that faith is not just a belief we hold in our hearts, it's something we practice daily. And he did so with discernment, knowing when to act and when to wait for God's timing. And finally, we prepare for our calling in the quiet steps. Every gesture of service, every moment we choose to identify with someone else's pain, prepares us for the greater things God has in store. These acts may seem small and may go unnoticed by the world, but God sees them. They are the building blocks of a strong and resilient faith. Moses' life is a testament to the fact that true faith is cultivated from the inside out. It begins with identifying with the suffering of others. It involves renouncing the temporary pleasures of this world for something of eternal value. It requires the courage to act justly, even when there's a risk. And it demands the wisdom to navigate challenges with discernment. Let's be inspired by Moses' example. May we also live an active and authentic faith, drawing near to God's people, identifying with their pain, letting go of worldly comforts, and keeping our eyes fixed on the eternal promise God has for all who follow Him faithfully. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this has been an encouragement to you. If you found this message helpful, please like, share, and subscribe for more daily devotionals. See you next time.